Hi, welcome back to Lakeside Quilt Making Arts. Today's video is about the block of the month for the quilt show, Jen Kingwell's Pick-A-Petal. I got it finished and I'm so excited. This is a beautiful block and I can't wait to get started on the February one. Here's the process of putting the last of this center block together. Enjoy. Hi, welcome back to Lakeside Quilt Making Arts for a slow stitch Saturday and Sunday. I am going to be working on, and I'm so looking forward to getting this done. This is our Pick-A-Petal for the quilt show, the block of the month for them. And what I'm doing is just the background pieces have to be added. So I'm going to pull out my instructions for that and get started on it, get my pieces ironed and go from there. Here I go. Okay, that was easy. These are really easy instructions. This block, although it's one of the larger ones, and it has some complexities to it, I feel like it's a good test of what's to come, although there was just one block made this time. Clearly, to do all of that, it's going to be multiple blocks per month of the same block, I'm guessing. Then we've got all the applique that's inside here too. It's gonna be fun. I do like a pattern that's easy to read. I had the block of the month pattern for the quilt shows 2021, I think it was, and that was the one called Color My World. And I can't wait to do that one, but honestly, the instructions were intimidating. It was a book. And that's fine if it's written well, right? I like a lot of detail. There's a sweet spot between not having enough and having too much. And I generally like information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take two of these where they match up like that and sew them together. And I've got only white thread here with me, so I'm going to go and see if I've got some dark blue. I think I do. I've got some thread left over from the 90s because I didn't quilt or stitch or anything for a couple decades there. It feels much more natural. Life feels much more natural now that I'm back to doing crafty things, sewing and, quilting. It just feels much better. This thread I purchased because I saw a sale at Joann's, so you got to buy. It would work out really well, but let me see if I have an old one that I can use up that would be better. I'm really glad I saved so much of my stuff. When I packed up my things in the 90s and said I will do this when I'm a grandma, when life calms down and I have a house to myself kind of thing, and because my children were young and they were all over the place and the house was small and it takes money and time and energy, and I didn't have it to give to my own personal crafts. Yeah, I like this one better versus that. That looks like black on the screen, but it suits much better. You would think this other one would, but well, I don't know. Let me analyze that a little bit. Anyway, my point is I'm glad I saved some things. When I packed everything up, I thought, hopefully I'll do this again one day. It may not be until I'm a grandma. And finally it hit me one day. It's like, okay, that point in time has come. I'm glad I'm back into it. It feels really good. I enjoy being creative in this manner. What I did is I used one very large container, the chest that I keep underneath here. And all my stuff had to fit in there, and a couple of small canvas bags. And it had to fit in there for me to keep it. And it did. And I have toted that thing around ever since and knew that it was kind of my prized possessions. It was my creativity in a box waiting to happen. I said the darker blue was going to match better, but it doesn't. The lighter blue, the newer purchase, is the right one to go with. I got 5 or 6 of these because they were really cheap. So hopefully it's a good quality. It's Gutermann. I believe that's a decent name. 100% cotton, CNE 50. Don't know what that represents, the C and the E and the E. We may have to figure that out. Let's look it up on our little iPad here. The C is for cotton. Okay, silly me. The NE is just, it just means number. Maybe you knew that? I did not know that. The unit of measurement is NE. This becomes a number of 840 yards. So 50 of these 840 yards of this, so 50 times 840, would be 1 pound. This is 876 yards. This is so very complicated. The world of thread and understanding it is something I'm going to have to just dive into at some point. We won't do that. Okay, let's get this out of the way. We are here to enjoy ourselves and just to do some hand stitching and get the base of this, the background of this medallion done, because very soon they're going to be coming out with the February block of the months, and then we get to work on that. I'm so excited because I've got my new plastic for making templates. I'm almost afraid that I've gotten template material that is too thick. I showed that in the last video this past week. I think it was the beginning of the comfort and the waiting video where I showed the new plastic that I got in. The cutting board material it's pretty thick in comparison to what I have already. So I don't know if my scissors, my kitchen shear scissors, are going to be able to cut that. I hope so, because I do like the idea of having a thicker template material. I'm ready to stitch. Just one more sip of my iced coffee and I'll get to it. Okay. I've done something to my thumb this morning in the last hour. So I'm hoping that it's not aggravated by working on this slow stitching. It probably won't. But again, I said it in I think the first video we did, I want to make sure I get a quilt done that's completely hand done in my lifetime. I want one quilt at least that is completely done from start to finish. Yeah, who knows how well my hands will work later. And if you have perfectly good hands that have never been a problem, I'm just telling you, that may not always be the case. So if you want to do some hand quilting, hand sewing, get on it. Did you see how quickly that thread went on that needle? Just like that. Didn't have to fight it. Didn't even have to have a good vision on it. It's amazing, that little trick. It's just such a treasure. I'm so glad. I'm telling you, it's nice to have YouTube. You never know what you can learn from people. It's so nice to have those resources available to us. That's really too long, but you know, not the end of the world. We'll be fine. I need to draw my 1/4 inch on here. First, I need to remark where my dots are. And notice that I've not put a knot in here. There's no need to. I will take some back stitches. I'll start and then do some back stitches, and that will lock my stitch in place whenever I get to going. So first we're going to find our template, and that was easy. Pulled out the right one. That can be used to mark my little dots. Pretty sure I did this at the time, but they've either faded or I didn't do it. Get a good mark in there so I can see it clearly. If you've not watched the video that we did yesterday on the Mars quilt, I encourage you to watch it. A part of it's kind of painful because I'm scrambling around asking questions, trying to work out what my next objective is on that quilt, how to figure out the construction. It's not like I've got a preconceived idea that I'm walking you through. You're seeing my thinking out loud in real time. It was a good exercise in appreciating the fact that as artists, sometimes the biggest stumbling block can be second guessing ourselves, that we owe it to ourselves to believe in ourselves, to trust our ideas, to accept that they are valuable, to commit to them and move forward with them. I was trying to figure out if I should do what I thought I should do, and that is to start cutting into the fabric, cutting into the top of the body of the quilt. That's a commitment once I start doing that. Of course, before I do it, I've got to do due diligence to make sure that when I'm cutting a line that is good. But my journey this year I really want it to be about learning. I am learning through these blocks of the months and quilt-alongs with other people, and they give me confidence to try some new things like this, like I'm doing right now. But it also, how do I put that? It gives me a sense of community. There's some safety in it because I know that somebody else has already done it, someone else has already approved of the plan and all those different things. But it also isn't, fulfilling a part of me that really wants to do some wonderfully creative things. Well, I can't do those wonderfully creative things if I don't have a good basis in understanding construction, procedures, all the things. There's just things you got to know. Things you got to know. All right, so this is going to be a 1/4 inch away. Learning how to mark a 1/4 inch on a curve. I'm sure there's some more quilt-friendly way to do it, but I just measure 1/4 inch away at various points, and then I just connect those dots. A little bit of hand drawing at that point, hand connecting them. And this is a quilt that is going to my granddaughter, who is currently an infant. This is not going into a quilt show, so it's not like I can do it too terribly wrong, right? See if you can see what I'm doing. I've laid the template there, and I'm marking against it, and that should give me a nice smooth line. That's good. Okay, we've got marked all the way around. Of course, all we need right now is just this section right here. I feel like this is almost paint by numbers. Once you get the template, you draw it out, you cut it. It's ABC 1, 2, 3, right? Super easy and simple and direct and straightforward. And then you draw your line, and then you just stitch on the line. So it's almost like those paint by the number kits. It's real straightforward. So then you just sit here and just do the work. I'm going to get you where you can see the hand stitching now. Yeah. And you can kind of see it. Of course, I'll probably be pulling it up to myself a good bit. I don't really feel like I have to wear my thimble, but it does assist. This seems to be the best thimble for me. It just allows room for my fingernail. My nails get really long really quickly, and so it's always nice to have something that accommodates the nail, and it just fits well. I've tried a selection of others, and they don't feel as good as this thing does. I don't know why I keep on trying something else well, I do know why. So for a while, my quilting things were packed up, right? And so if I did any kind of little, work, sewing work or whatever here and there, and needed a thimble, like I made some stockings once and a couple other little crafty things. Then I went in pursuit of my thimble, and I didn't know I had it stored or even how to find that chest at some points, when it's stuck up in a closet, in an attic. So I've bought them over time. But you also think, sure, this cheap little plastic isn't the best thing in the world. I want a really good thimble. I want a pretty thimble. Well, the one that works is the pretty one. Say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? You're supposed to be happy with the things you have. I need better light on this. Let me see if I can't figure that out. I'm telling you, good light is priceless. Even with my glasses on, I need good light. And this is, this back of this fabric's decently light, but I still need it. There's still some contrast. There is some contrast because the back of the fabric is light, but it's still not huge. Like that black line that I just put on there, I didn't try to just dump a lot of ink on there, so it's not as dark as it could be, and the light's not hitting right on it. Let me see what I can do about getting some light over here. I don't know if you can tell, but that's better. Not great. I don't know where I got this light. It's like a light that you'd put up in a shop or something like that. And it's not the best of bright lights. I have an OTT light, OTT, that light that I keep over at the sewing machine, and it's fantastic. I would like to have another couple varieties of it, and at some point I will. Until then, I will mock it up because I've got a lot of lights shining on me right now so that the video is nice and bright for you. as well lit as this room is, you still got to add you got to add studio light for it to look good on video. And even with all these extra lights, if there's not a strong light right on the stitching line, you're spending too much time straining your eyes and your neck. And I don't want to do that. This is why you don't do a lot of thread. It likes to get tangled up. That's why they say only do like 18 inches or so. And with an easy threading method, then there's nothing to be intimidated by. I like to hold the thread as it's coming in, and that helps to prevent some of the potential knotting that it tries to do. Say that just as it created a knot. The dexterity in my thumbs is not what it should be or used to be. So when I need to move my needle around inside my hand, I kind of use some object that's near me. One of the reasons I like using my wool mat over here, I'll put my pins. You can see my pins are maybe off camera. Before I worry about another light, I will be adding another piece of storage. I'm anxious to get that one cabinet put together and put it underneath this table and it work out the way I think it will. And if it does, then I'll get another one under the table. It's kind of hodgepodgey, not what I would ideally create if I could just buy new stuff, right? I could design a better flow, but I can also work well with what I have and add a few things to it and try to keep some kind of generally appealing aesthetic going on so that I feel comfortable with it being in my home, just off the living room and off the foyer when you come in the front door and you see the studio. So nice to keep the integrity of that. Every once in a while, I'll take just a tiny back stitch just to do a little lock, Yeah, you can tell you've got cotton thread when it wants to just knot up, undo. The more you pull it through the fibers of the cotton, it kind of drags on the thread. And, every time you pull it through the fabric, it's doing a little bit of a wear and tear on the fibers of the thread. And so then those agitated fibers of the thread want to catch on each other. Having a hard time breaking the old habit of pulling out a long piece of thread and so I don't have to thread it again. But that's my old thinking. I need to change that thinking. The holding down the thread as it's going into the hole keeps it from tangling too badly. It just takes extra time. There's no need for that. I have one of the things I kept from the 90s is a quilting hoop. I went to Paducah, Kentucky for the quilt show there somewhere in the 90s. I don't remember exactly when, and it's definitely before 94, so somewhere between 92 and maybe up to 95, but probably before then. I'm not quite sure. I think I won the hoop. It holds one of the PVC hoops. It's a floor hoop stand that I have. And I don't know if the actual hoop that goes in it was something I gave my daughter too, but I know the floor stand is something I gave her. Well, she's in new mama mode, so she's not doing much hand quilting these days. So I'm getting it back. I will put it to work. I'm looking forward to it. I'll definitely put it to work on this quilt. Maybe some others too. I like to add some extra details to my quilts, some embroidery or things like that. And having a hoop to work on is helpful. I don't know how the floor stand is going to work out for me given my condition with my neck. But we'll see. It may just work out that I just need a hoop that I can hold in my lap or a lap hoop. Have you seen those? Those are really nice too. Okay, so I've done a back stitch at the point. So you're not going all the way to the end. So I can separate those for you to see. I've gone to my point and not beyond it. And then I'm going to go back the other direction. A couple of stitches, there's 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This will be the third one. And technically, that should be all I really need to do because I put a locking stitch in at the point. But I'm just a little paranoid. So while the needle is in my hand and the thread's in my hand, I will just take one more, go in the opposite direction, and call it good then. But you've got to make sure that you care as much about the alignment of those stitches when you're taking those back stitches as you do when you're going forward, taking the running stitches. Kind of flattening out my fibers just to make sure that I'm not tangling it up. All right, look at that. We've got the background to our medallion. We got 1/4 of it done. So I can take it to the ironing board, and I'll probably wait until I get all 4 of them done, and then press that open. So since I pressed these open, I should have that pressed open too. So I'll remember that when I go to the ironing board. I'm going to go ahead and set that on the ironing station. All right, got all my lines drawn while Zoe barked her little head off. So I don't know what she saw out there. Okay. All right, I'm going to do the other 2 really quickly. Then we'll meet back up here in a second. Surprise, surprise. Doing these other 2 corners of the background for the Pick-A-Petal medallion. I did both of those in 1/4 of the time that it took me to do the other 2. Part of that was just getting familiar with, you know, having a needle in my hand again and that kind of thing. And also my thread was getting shorter and shorter, so I was not having to fight with it as much. And that one threading of the needle at the very beginning lasted for all 4. And ideally, that's not the way it should go. You should not be fighting with your thread like I was to get it out of the way and keep it out of the way. So I've got all 4 of these done. I'm going to get these pressed, and then I'm going to get them sewn together, and then we'll take a look at them again. All right, I have cruised right along. I meant to show you what I was doing a little bit earlier than this, but I got a phone call from my son, and I didn't want to stop doing what I was doing. I got it all pieced together and pressed out, and now I'm piecing the center into its background. So I've got half a circle, well, half an arc, a full arc, and that's all I've got pinned right now. I love these little magic pins. Can you see that? I love that little head. And then they bend really well, and they're really skinny. And that's, in my book, a really good pin. And I think that's silicone so that, you know, you can put an iron over it and not mess up your iron and not melt your pin. So I'm going to start stitching on this, and then I'm going to have to call it quits for the evening. But I want to at least get a section of this done, make sure I've got it, you know, pinned on correctly, and then I'll call it quits and get started back on it again tomorrow. I'm excited. It's feeling like it's coming together a little bit. Doing these arcs is, I think, a little bit easier by hand in some ways, and in some ways easier by the machine. When you're stitching by hand, we're stitching up to that dot, right? So you leave your seam allowance open. So making sure that see that little gap that's right there? See if I can show that to you. Okay, hang on a second. Yeah, you can see that gap that's formed right there. Making sure they get sewn together as you're taking a running stitch across here so that they're not splayed apart and they're, you know, stuck together. That's, you know, requires a little bit of attention to detail as you're going along, and that's okay. I don't mind attention to detail. That's why I wanted to do this project, so I'd have a slow project, something that slowed me down a little bit and made me pay attention to not only just the construction of things, but just the emotional side of it too. Like accepting that things can take longer and you still make progress and you can still make something beautiful that way. And all the things, we've talked about it already. putting another pin or two in here. I just wanted to finish out these 2 arcs. I've got 1 full arc pinned, half of another one, and then almost half of another one. I want to get all that sewn, and then I'll call it quits for today, because I've got other things I need to be doing. But, oh, look, little teaser. Oh, that's going to look good. It'll look better than that when the pins are out, right? All right, I think on these seams that go over an arc, since there's some odd pressure on those seams, it might be particularly important that my stitching not be long stitches. My stitches, I think, tend to be a decent length, but I don't know that they're as short as I would want them to be for these curves where there's some opposing forces there. I put in a lot of pins, right? And I did that on purpose. I'd just rather make sure that what I'm about to stitch is at the right angle and lined up, and not have to reconfigure things when I might be distracted by a phone call or my dog barking and calling my attention to the fact that the neighborhood cat is walking across their backyard, or whatever other important things come up in her world. I'd rather make sure I've got it all in place, and then I can just set and stitch. So with that said, I'm going to set and stitch. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes, and I should have all that done by then. Now's a good time to also point out that before I take, I don't know if I can show this to you. I got a good hold on it with my finger, so I don't want to move it, but I've taken the seam out of the way. If I'm going to start from the right side, I've taken that seam allowance and pushed it to the left, so I can put my needle in right where that dot was made from the template, and it's going to hit on the back side. It's going to hit the fabric on the back right where the dot is on it, without piercing the seam for it. Ouch, I just stuck my finger on it. See if I can put that up. See where my needles come through and the seam allowance is moved over out of the way. I'm going to pierce through the seam allowance, going that way. Before I go back down, I'll come onto the other side. Okay, I've gone in where the point is at the base of the seam allowance on both pieces of fabric on that seam allowance. See where the 2 pieces of fabric of that seam allowance are like angel wings or butterfly wings are puffed up. I've gone at the base of them, gone all the way through it. And that puts me on the other side of it without catching any of that seam allowance. I got my thread anchored on the other side. I need to get this. Now that I've done that, I can pull this pin out. It's out of the way. It was kind of taking up some bulk that I needed. Gonna go back down and through to the other side, but not catch the seam allowance. I need to move that seam allowance over. This is the slow part, just making sure you do this well. But it makes a difference on how this whole thing is gonna lie, how flat it will lie. Yes, I'm in the right spot. Ouch, fumbled my needle. Okay, don't have it marked on the back side, unfortunately. I failed to do that, but I have a pretty good eye for what a 1/4 inch is. Okay, so I've taken a running stitch away from the seam allowance, but I'm going to go back to the dot and anchor that one more time, just so it's nice and tight right there, because that's where the kind of a weak point in the stitching and the whole construction of this block will be. And so I want to make sure I've got extra good stitching right there. It's locked and it's small enough. Back stitch with one more running stitch, and we can start moving forward now. This is a nice thing to do on the weekend. You know, on the weekend, I can get a lot of work done if I were to just focus on, you know, any of the other projects too. But after a full week of being active, it's nice to just sit and kind of contemplative. I can watch videos. Been watching a little bit of that YouTube channel, Who Do You Think You Are? And the last one I watched was on Twiggy, the model from 60s, I think she was. And yeah, I think she was from the 60s. The lady with the really skinny, long legs. She was a really pleasant person in that YouTube video anyway. Watch that. And right now I've got my iPad right here. I'm watching Lisa Bongine. She's always an energetic watch. I like to see what they're doing up there. I'd love to go to see their resort, their retreat area, and do one of their getaways. I don't think I could keep up with the demands of it, however, so I don't see that happening. Like I just don't see that I could travel with my stuff and show up on their schedule and all that. I have to pace myself to get my life keep my life keeping on, and that's just a lot of extra energy it would take. But if they would allow me to come and just be a bird on the wall, what's that? A fly on the wall? What's that expression? Where you're just kind of hanging out, watching and learning. There's a term for it, an academic term for it too. When you're, what's it called? When you're auditing a class, you're just learning from the class without actually participating. That would be great, because I can learn a lot from watching, especially if I watch a lot of people at the same time. That would be cool. All right, approaching another seam allowance. I'm going to pull this pin. Oh no, right now I'll leave that pin in. No, it's over on the right-hand side. I need it out of the way. But I'm going to let it continue to hold the fibers, the fabric on the left side of that seam in place as I approach from the right. Gonna get this done. I wonder which block we're gonna do next. I wonder if they release it on February 1st. I need to go to the forum and find that kind of stuff out. Okay. I moved my light that I had over here. I moved it back over to the ironing station because that's where it belongs. And the cord was getting tangled up. Not that it was getting tangled up, but I was afraid that I was going to trip because I had it stretched. This would all be much quicker if my thumb functioned better. I could manipulate this needle more easily. It's okay. Still getting it done, right? Still getting it done. I'm pleased. Okay, I'm gonna move that needle now. That pin. I'm on the back side. I'm gonna go through the 2 layers to pop out on the other side. Doing a little bit of stab stitching when I'm doing this part of it, just because I want to be meticulous. It is okay. All right, so I went through this seam allowance at the base from the right, came out the left, and took a tiny stitch, back stitched it to lock it. I'm gonna take another one right there, just because, like I said, I want those intersection points to be nice and tight. Now I can take running stitches until I get to the next seam allowance. And what that does, by doing it that way, I'm not sewing that seam allowance down. It stays loose so I can fan it open to press it open, or I can move it to the side if I need to or whatever. But obviously this is going to be open. I like that. Now, if I wanted, I guess I could have stitched through it. But I remember on the interview that Alex and Ricky had with Jen, they had her on there and she demonstrated how to do the hand sewing, and she talked about going through the seam allowances like I just talked about, and and said that was an important aspect of getting it to lie flat and the construction of this quilt. So, alrighty, there you go. That's what we will do then. I am kind of surprised that Barbara is doing this quilt construction by machine, since it was a hand quilted quilt. And that's kind of the beauty of Jen Kingwell's work. I mean, it's fine that it's machine stitched. It's great to have that option. And another version of me would have loved that. But I'm in the mood to learn how to do it by hand. But I could see, I know Alex can't do everything, but I mean, she loves to do her hand stitching. So she could have demonstrated how to do this. But while they were working with Jen to get all this in the works is when Alex had enough stuff going on in her life. She's had to redo her kitchen cabinets. She fought breast cancer and fought it well. Do believe she is in good medical, physical health. That's good. Okay, oops. Yeah, that needle was just, that pen was just holding it in place. Okay, so I got about 1/4 of what I wanted to get sewn. And it took me about half of the time that I was hoping that it would take. I only have so much time, so I need to check my time. I got a few more minutes here. Let me see what I can get done in another few minutes. I tend to want to get my stitches a little too tight. I do that in knitting too. Like I wanted to make sure things were good and secure, and then I had to kind of flatten things out to make sure I'm not creating any puckers. I've just given up on knitting. I'm going to take my thimble off. It kind of messes me up and slows me down. My time for sewing today is up, but I've got a little section done. We're going to take a sneak peek. I'm going to turn it to where you can see it. Okay, see, I've sewn this much, so it's part of an arc and part of another. And look how good that's gonna look. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm pleased. And so the seams will be pressed towards the background because there's just a lot going on here, and that kind of, in effect, pushes the seams that way so you don't fight it. And it's a darker fabric, so it will hide it. Oh my goodness. So excited. Wish I didn't have other stuff to do. But I do, so I'm gonna go do it. Then I'll come back to this before I get this video up for you to see. You will see this whole thing done, I promise you. I'm getting super excited seeing a little bit of it come together. It's just very rewarding, like we were talking about with some of the other things. Like when I got that block figured out, and when I got the Mars quilt figured out about what my next step is. Every obstacle that has a little bit of a solution to it, it makes a difference in, you know, the psyche, and it just energizes me. So I've got to leave it for now, and I'll come back to it probably in the morning. Talk to you later. Well, I have been a little busy bee since I saw you last on this video where I'm working on the Pick-A-Petal for the Quilt Shelves Block of the Month. I have been out doing a haul, H-A-U-L, haul. But before we get to talking about that, I promised you that I would pull out the plastic that I got to see how it compared to the one I already had, and it looks like it's the exact same material. I was worried that it was going to be too thick for my kitchen shears, but it's not. It looks every bit like it's the exact same material. If it's any different, it is not decipherable by touch or sight. All right, that is encouraging. So what I got was, trying not to wrinkle this, it's, I don't know how to pronounce that, F-O-T-O-U-Z-Y, Home Collection. It's cutting boards. There are 4 in this package. It's from Amazon, and that should make, what's the size of these? Does it say? It doesn't say. Well, gee, I have a ruler right here. Okay, so that's basically 11 inches that way and 15, so 11 by 15, which is an odd size. So it's 11 by 15, and it was $9.99 or something like that. So 10 bucks for that, which is great. Okay, I'm gonna sit here and after I find my thread and finish sewing on my Pick-A-Petal and tease you about watching the Moda Fabric video on Monday so you can find out what I was up to while I was away. There's my thread. In one of the recent videos, I forget which one, I told you that these are the scissors that I used to rave about. But in fact, it's been these that I used to rave about. They were inside my quilted little fabric pouch that I keep all my pins and hand sewing things in. And so when I spotted these at some point, they were the replacement for these that I had bought back in the 90s. But now that we're comparing all my little scissors, let me show you the little green ones. All right, so these are the Karen K Buckleys. They kind of stick a little bit right there. Otherwise, these are fantastic, and I love them. Everything about them except for how they stick right there. I don't mind a little bit of resistance. It's not too bad. I feel like I have more control if I've got that sensory feedback, you know. But these open so beautifully. I feel like I don't feel like I'm missing any control because these open so beautifully. But the holes for the fingers could be a little bit larger. That would be great. And the tips could be a little sharper. I don't know how much, if you can discern. Open those a little bit and put them against my hand. Don't know if you can see. This is Karen K Buckley, and these are the little silver ones. All right, now we've got the stork, these. So I like how much more pointed they are than these. They're fairly equivalent to a point, not quite as fine pointed as the Karen K Buckleys. They open well, not as well as the silver ones. Certainly better than the Karen K Buckley. They fit my fingers better, and I think it's because this little notch right there creates a better grasp where you can pull it open easier. I'm super sensitive to these kinds of things, to anything that affects my dexterity, any of my joints. But there's nothing to complain about these, really. I mean, they could be serrated and they could have a finer point, but for basic needlework, they're great. But see how my hand slides right in there? And I get 2 fingers, and then I've got a place for my finger there, and then it's serrated, and it's a super fine point. These are just the bomb. Okay, so what I did today has flat worn me out. So this is the beautiful part about hand sewing. I can still make some progress, and I'm just going to sit here peacefully, probably watch some YouTube videos, that kind of thing, sip on my Lady Grey hot tea, and just kind of calm and be peaceful after an outing today. So I went to the store, not just any store, but instead of going into town for fabric, for the Moda Fabric Block of the Month that we're doing on Mondays. I did something that I feel is a little bit sacrilegious. It's a Moda block pattern, and yet I'm going to be using not thrifted shirts, but they're kind of lost shirts is what they are. What did I pick up? I picked these up, and it's probably because of how they feel in my hand and my fingers. And they give a really fine point, right? Anyway, so what I did, I live in Scottsboro, Alabama, which is 45 minutes outside of Huntsville, Alabama, which I consider to be home. I just kind of sleep and quilt at the lake in Scottsboro, Alabama. And, but my life is still in Huntsville. But in Scottsboro is a store called, you may know of it because it's kind of popular. It was just kind of interesting that this little sleepy town, which is not quite as sleepy as it used to be, but it has a store that is pretty well known. I think it was even on CBS, featured on CBS Sunday Morning once upon a time. It is called Unclaimed Baggage. So what I did is I went to Unclaimed Baggage and went to look for their shirts, thinking that, well, you know what? The shirts that I showed you earlier that my mother had cut up for my son, that my mother had bought for my son that I cut up. Well, why don't I just go and see if I can find more of those? So my friend Margot came and we did just that. We went to Unclaimed Baggage, and while I was doing that, my mother was going to a thrift store in Huntsville where they were having a 50% off. And then she got some 100% cotton men's shirts too, but she got hers for $2. Now, the Unclaimed Baggage merchandise, it's not all Unclaimed Baggage. I think it's, I think some of it may come from shipments that get lost or get delayed and rejected or turned back or something along those lines, because sometimes you'll get multiples and multiples and multiples of things. But then there's obviously, clearly in the mix, there's things that are slightly worn too. But you're going to find plenty of brand new items that still have tags on them. So there's some shirts there that were on sale for $20, $30, and $50. Those I did not bring home. What I did is I picked up a selection that fit the colorway that I'm looking for, and we can talk more about that in the video for Moda. Right now, we're going to stay here and stay focused on sewing on this. I am so happy. Oh, see, this is why I shouldn't talk and work at the same time. I sewed down, not this one, but I sewed down that side of the seam allowance. I'm going to leave it. It's probably fine. It's not perfection. So I just need to pay more attention. I'm going to go back over that one more time to make sure, since I messed up and locked down that seam allowance, I don't think I got right up against the seam, right up against where the two fabrics meet. So I'm going to go back over it just to make sure. I'd rather be safe than sorry by putting a little extra effort in right now while I'm needle is in hand and the fabric is in hand, then overlook it, and then have a problem later. We don't want any problems at any point. So it's going to take me a minute. That's okay. I may watch a movie, sip my tea. Life is good. I wanted to show you what I think I'm going to start doing, if I can remember to do it, is as I'm approaching this set of seams, I turned the seam allowance away from where I'm approaching, and then I locked both of them in place with a pin. That'll just hold it in place, and if I can remember to do that early on, then as I get to it, if I get distracted or whatever, I've already got my my seam allowance situation all covered. Do you hear Zoe? She's trying to get my attention. Has she already been let out 3 times in the past hour? Yes, but I think we're about to go again. Yes, Zoe, hang on. Yes, ma'am. She needs it urgently. Okay. You know what I've just about decided is the reason that I'm kind of fighting with my threads so much. See how it's coiling up every time I try to come back to my stitching? Maybe it's because of the kind of thread that it is. Because I've been using nothing but RFL for the past 13 months. And it's too big of a bite there, Dawn. Back up. And I don't remember having that problem at all. But I'm having to fight my thread. It's because it was coiling up, and I don't like that. But I bet you it's because of the kind of thread. And again, this is Gutermann. It's probably something about how it's treated. I don't know. I am not a thread wizard. Those people do exist, and they really impress me. I've got a lot to learn about threads. I at least need to just figure out the ones I like for whatever purposes I find myself doing. And then I don't have to worry so much about learning everything about thread. But I need to understand enough to where I don't make purchases that I don't need, you know? I feel like I'm really good about that, and then I go and buy several spools of an unknown brand just because it was on sale. And it was pricey enough, so I thought, well, it's probably a good thread. But I didn't really evaluate the situation. One more stitch there, and then I'm going to turn my seam allowance to the side. All right, I'm securing my needle out of the way. I'm going to hold firmly where those seams, where that seam is, and how it's lined up with the fabric on the back. Slide that seam allowance over and put that pin in. All right, now I can stitch freely all the way over there. I mentioned I like these little pins right here, my little magic pins. I think they're called the extra fine point ones, or extra fine. I don't remember if it was extra fine point or not. I didn't mark my seam on this, but I felt like I can eyeball what a 1/4 inch is fairly safely. So I'm living on the wild side, you might say. I cannot wait to see what it looks like. I'll show you. Okay, of course, this is just one background piece that's been stitched on. You can see how it's puckering a little bit right there. Can you see that? That's because I've gotten my stitches too tight. I pull on them. I shouldn't be doing that, but I can work that out. That's okay. Look at that. Can you appreciate how good that's going to look? Oh, well, actually, I guess it's one whole one here and almost a whole one there. So it's 1/4 of the background. And that looks super good. I'm excited. I'm going to keep on cruising. I didn't think earlier about showing you how I pinned these background pieces on to make sure everything lined up the way it should. So what I've learned about, and most of you may know this, if not, this lesson is for whoever doesn't know it. When you're sewing an arc, you pin your extreme points, like the point on one end or the other end where they're supposed to line up, and the point in the middle, and then start pinning on the inside from there. I don't know if that makes sense. So this arc is supposed to meet up with that arc. Okay, so I know that, I hope you can see this. With all these lights in here, I can't see the screen well enough to see what you can see. So this point is supposed to meet up right there. Okay, I'm going to put that pin in. There. That is met up. That's going to stay put. All right. So I'll come over here and there's my point that's supposed to meet up right there. Put that pin in there. Secure it. All right, this middle point meets up with the middle here. So I'm going to put those two together. All right. That's my point, and that's my point. Make sure that the top of the fabrics match up. And I feel like it's not lining up exactly, so I'm doing a little bit differently. I'm eyeballing it where the splits meet. Yeah, that feels comfortable that that's the right spot. Okay. Pin in there, pin on the other side of that seam. Okay, so now I've got this arc that's got to meet up with that arc. And I find the middle of it. The middle of both. The middle of this side is clear, it's at that seam. Okay, but I'm just to make sure I'm doing the right thing, I'm gonna fold that in half, pinch it, and take that pinch point right over there and line it up with that seam. And then where the two seam allowances split is where my line from the front will meet up. Yep, perfect. Stick that pin. Now, technically, I shouldn't need to put any more pins in because it's short enough of a distance that you can just kind of flatten it out as you go. But I like the security of it, and these pins are easy to put in, so I place them. They just give me a little sense of security, that I'm on the right track and I'm not losing track and that kind of thing. All right, I don't think I even had to pinch this one because this is lying flat enough. It's quite obvious. Don't know why it was behaving so beautifully. But it did. And we will accept it. Okay, so. Oh, missed this point over here. These two arcs, the front and back, that are meeting up are less concave, less sharp. So it's easier for those to line up. You can see it's trying to, the bottom one's trying to bulge out, so I'm going to manhandle it and stick it in place. Now, might as well carry it to the end. I'll get this in place too. I know everybody who's doing this by machine is way ahead of me. Well, I'm not competitive in that regard. I'm not competitive against others per se. I let others inspire me and fuel me along, but I don't look at other people's accomplishments and say they're better than me or I am worse than them. I just don't do that for the most part. But I do let it motivate me, and I am competitive against my own performance. Yep, that's my middle point. Put a little pinch right there. And that's going to meet up to that seam. Use my little magic once. And technically, if I was ahead of the game, I would take, see, there's a little extra material right here, but I think I can ease it in. I think it's fine. I'm gonna err on the side of having it tighter towards this seam and pushing the extra that way, because I think my seam may have been left to separate a little bit right here. Let's see. Yeah, that'll be good right there. Voila. I think, as I was saying, if I was really ahead of the game, as I'm doing this, I would push those seams out of the way. I think I will do that on that one at least. Okay, so that's another quarter of the background that will be done when I get this section sewn. I'll show you what that looks like as soon as I'm done. I'm very pleased to report that we are finished with the January block of the month for the quilt show, Jen Kingwell's Pick-A-Petal, and I love it. I got done last night, so I didn't get any photos or any video of it last night. I wanted to make sure we had good daylight going on, make sure we had good pictures of it. So one of the things I've learned is that I need to go ahead and mark all of my pieces really clearly. As I'm putting my first ink on my fabric and marking my 1/4 inch seam line, I need to just go ahead and mark all of them all at one time so I don't get lazy and not do that when I'm constructing it. Because I did that a few times and I can kind of see a few places where my arcs are not arcing as smoothly as I would like for them to. And that has created not too irregular, my edges are not too irregular, but there's a little bit of movement there that I'm thinking maybe I should have, if I were to do this again, I might make it a little bigger so I can cut it down in case any of that fabric gets taken in. And in fact, I could do that whenever if I needed to, but I think I'm fine. I mean, overall, I haven't laid it down on a square. I should probably do that. I'll do that. It's not too bad, but I should trim it up in a couple of places. So that exercise was helpful. I do need to take it to the cutting table and just kind of square it up a little bit, but none of the fabric looks like it was taken in too much. Maybe a little bit here at the very top, I can eyeball that and see that maybe it has, but again, it might just be that on this side over here, it wasn't cut as smoothly as it should have been, maybe. I don't know, we'll see. I'll lay it down on the cutting board. But this is Saturday, the 27th, when I am making this video, and you'll see this tomorrow on the 28th. And then Thursday, the 1st, we get the next PDF for the January block of the month. And I'm guessing on that one, it's going to be a smaller block, but there's multiple blocks to be made. And so with that, you'll get a little bit more of that gratification reward system going on the ongoing basis. Because this one, it's a big block. So it wasn't completed until that last stitch went in, right? There was lots to build. It's real slow go at first. Because after you've done a lot of stitching by the time you get that done and get that added to it, and then you got to stitch these guys together, but you still don't have a block together, and then you got to marry them, and so you've done all that, and then you haven't put your back on, and then you got to create your back, and then you got to put your back on it. So there were several steps, but you didn't have a finished block. I think with the next set in February, we will have smaller blocks, but more of them. So then the mental challenge isn't the gratification, it's the repetitiveness, which is fine. I signed up for this and I want to do every bit of this. And heaven help me, God willing, I will get this thing done all by hand from start to finish. Don't know how long it's going to take me, but I will do my very best. That's it for this video. I really appreciate you being here. I hope it encourages you to take a little bit of time, slow down a little bit. This life of ours is so fast-paced. We all need something that makes us slow down. You know, you can't pull up any social media feed without seeing someone touting the benefits of meditative mindfulness and, you know, things like that. And there's a million gazillion ways to do it. This is one of them. And it's one I've chosen for this year and for my granddaughter, and to have that legacy for her. Overall, I'm fairly pleased with my stitches. I can do better. But overall, I'm not displeased with my stitching. Especially when I saw the whole thing together, it made me feel pretty happy with it. So that's my takeaway. Patience, patience, patience. Slow down, enjoy the pace. We don't have to rush through everything. Yes, it takes away from other things we can get done. And that may not be a bad thing either. Because that's my mentality, is bulldoze through, produce, 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 produce. If I can, do it. If I can get up and move and do, I should get up and move and do. But taking more time to let those other projects marinate in my head while I'm working on this has been helpful too. This is my journey. I'm glad you're here with me. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye.